plains of Tuscany, plus more marvelous classical art than exists in any other city.
Alright, should be live now. Let me pull up my preview video such and such so that I can see what's going on. And there it is. Okay. Gotta mute it. I forget little things as I do stuff over and over and over and over and over and over. And this frame rate is so low. This frame rate is so low. 2, 1. Ooh, 1 frame per second. 3, 5. Come on, get a little bit higher. 11. Just when I start up, it takes a sec sometimes. Okay, anyway, what I worked on last time was photographing this animation from some different perspectives. The GIF that you see right here is not the final one. I did some editing in post to help it get a smoother transition because I didn't tighten the camera in place as hard as I should have. But anyway, this waveform, it's designed by taking points on a line and repeating that point, and every instance of that point is a slight inversion of the next one. There's some inconsistent, it's not an exact inversion because I have a offset sort of thing so that it pushes it closer or further away so that the waveforms aren't just all the same happening simultaneously. So there's some offset sort of stuff there. But anyway, series of points on a line that are moving up and down in a pattern. And if you're just following it and it's one instance of a point, it's following a sine wave. So it goes slow at the top and then speeds up, then slows down. So it has a naturalistic sort of look to it, but it's following a sine wave for that up and down movement. And then that point is repeated with a slight delay on where it is in that position. And then there is a handle. If you ever work with vectors, I don't know specifically, but I think it's a Bezier curve, but it has a value, and the further out you pull a handle, the more the point will influence the curve that's coming out from it. And so these have a pretty moderate handle distance on them, and so it's a softer sort of look about it. These lines never touch one another. They get pretty close, but they don't actually come into contact. And so what I have today is one that has, let's see how clear you can see that. Not super clear, but you can see something there where there's no distance on the handle, so the point has no influence on the curve coming out of it. It's just a point on a line, so it's much more rigid. These have fewer points left to right if you're going left to right on this, and fewer lines total in this line, this direction. And the movement is more pronounced, and then also there are instances where the waveforms touch one another because I want it to kind of look like they're handing off something. Like if you were to imagine a like bucket line, if you see in cartoons or other things where you're like pass water down a line, take a bucket, you pass it to the next person, and so this bucket is moving in a more or less linear motion, but it's coming from different points and sort of being handed off, and I wanted to see how that all looks. A few of those different variables all thrown into one, see how it affects. This tape has talking on it, but yeah, so I'm going to be photographing that. You'll be able to see what the actual stills look like much better once I set up my camera for overhead shot. And then I'll be clicking through this one. This next animation also only has 24 frames as opposed to 32. It has 8 fewer frames, which should mean that it runs a little bit faster, but I'll be seeing. Okay, and yeah, I'm gonna start setting that up.
their gold-lettered signs and brass scales. On the second floor, walk up or take the escalator. There are aisles full of irresistible artichokes, zucchinis, eggplant, and carefully orchestrated rows of peaches, melons, oranges, and figs, all looking like an Italian still life painted in a Tuscany vegetable garden. Note the
And I'll give a slight talk through, and then I got to move the mic out of the way. But so here you can see, compared to, I'll turn it back on actually, where this one, the one that you're seeing animated, has a denser number of lines that are going in this direction, and the movement from like the top to the bottom point on these is much smaller in the animated versus this one, and there are also fewer points going from left to right, I believe. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, maybe it's the same. I guess I found a sweet spot that I liked, but I thought it was fewer, so I accidentally lied. I was incorrect. But anyway, so be photographing this guy, and go from there. So I'm gonna move the mic away, actually turn the mic off, because it's gonna just pick up noise in the background, and it's nicer to have just the music. Also turn the music up a bit.
Signora at my pensione what to do about the problem, and she showed me this gadget about the size of half of a bar of soap with a grid on top. You plug it into the wall, put an insecticide, it's odorless, a tablet on the grid, and you sleep that night. I guarantee that no one else on your block at home will own one. An atmosphere. It's not that the heating of the fine olive oil of Tuscany is in any way oppressive, rather that taste buds tend to be aroused very early during late morning roamings, so considerations of lunch tend to quickly overwhelm all other considerations. This is a tornabuoni. This is the Florence equivalent of New York City's Fifth Avenue, and it runs for 6 blocks due north from the Arno and the Ponte Santa Trinita. Here's where the most elegantly prestigious shops are found, bastions of such internationally renowned designers as Armani, Buccellati, Ferragamo, and Valentino. Just like Tuscan sunsets. The Via Tornabuoni is not without its share of cafes and bars, practically an Italian institution. Coffee in Italy comes in all sorts of permutations. Caffè normale. They say that 40% of all the great art in Western civilization is located within the boundaries of Italy, and there's no doubt that a good percentage of that treasure is anchored in Florence. Between the Piazza della Signoria and the Arno River is the famous Uffizi, housing what may be the world's largest and finest collection of Italian and European paintings from the 13th through the 18th centuries. The hot chocolate and the tray of little cakes here also rate bravos. But it's also the combination of the sensual and the historic on the Piazza della Signoria that is truly remarkable. You sit at Rivoire and face the Palazzo Vecchio with Michelangelo's larger-than-life David gleaming against the brown stones, and then at right angles is the Loggia dei Lanzi, where Perseus stands holding the head of Medusa. By the way, the David statue is very beautiful, but it's nonetheless a fake, one of two identical frauds set in prominent places in the city. In theory, Florence was a democratic republic in the 15th century, governed by members of her trade guilds. In fact, Cosimo the Elder and the rest of the Medici family controlled the entire city.
We continue now on the other side.
The guild signori were elected and served for a period of 2 months, during which time they lived in the palace. The palace was designed to prevent any takeover by extremists, and any subversive activity could be seen from its tall watchtower, where the great warning bell was located. Bridge in the early morning before the jewelers have unpadlocked their shops, and when the light glows with pastel hues of brown, yellow, or red, or whether you wander across when the bridge is a hub of spirited bustling and bargaining, complete with art. with functional, irresistible objects. Notebooks, address books, diaries, accordion files, portfolios, photo albums, picture frames, paperweights, bookends, all covered with papier couvé, a marble.
A little bit louder. Gotta change the position of this because it blocks the light. The font choice is one from Cuddle, and it's the simplest one that is just a linear line, so it just pulls once across, as opposed to some of the fonts are more for cutout or fills. You can see the camera angle as is. I've got like a boom mount for the wall, and that's what I have the camera attached to, and then the camera is secondarily on a ball and socket joint for the actual mount. And then I can't adjust the camera right now because I'm in the middle of recording one of them, but it's just this one's 24 frames and stroke fonts. And what was it? I was looking in Cricut to see what they had. Or not Cricut. Yeah, in Cricut. And they have writing fonts is what they have them referred to as in that. But anyway, it's a piece of like very thin plywood that has 3 holes drilled in it, because if there's a fourth one, actually there are 4 holes, but there's only 3 tacks that are in the plywood,
nearly deserted.
And because that way I can have a directional light and it not cast a shadow. And then there are embroidery tacks are what I have on the back of this. Do I have any readily available? I don't want to touch too much on my desk and move things around. Let's see. This embroidery tack has like an almost inch wide flat head, and then like an inch and a half length of the nail, but it makes it so it's a really good, it's better than the T-pins that I was using for aligning things, because it's a more robust thing. It doesn't wiggle around as much, and a wider head that's not just in one direction, where the T-pin is just in one direction, so it wiggles. And I had some smaller ones of these, and then I tried to see if there were larger ones, and you can get, this is I think about where they max out. And then I have a remote shutter release for the camera. That's a digital remote shutter, because I had a physical one that's like the long wire in the tube, but I found that, well, first of all, the setup that I have, it's not long enough for that, and if you get the ones that are long enough, they get a little bit pricier. But you can get, this is a Fuji camera, or Fujifilm, I think they actually go by Fujifilm, camera, and you can get a remote shutter release that just has a single button on it, and it has a like it's a miniature headphone jack. It's not, I forget what the width is, but you can just buy extension cables for that pretty easily. And so I've got like, I don't know, 15 feet of cable for that, and so it goes down around my desk up to the base of the mount and then back down. And that's also where the power cable is for the camera, and the HDMI cable goes up and around. The HDMI cable isn't as long because it's just going to my computer, which is on my desk. A mixture of things, but I'm going to move this mic out of the way because it's in close proximity to the light and it might block and change the exposure. And then I'll get through this one and then I can show a little bit more after I photograph the rest of these stills so that I don't have to restart if you wanted to see more of the setup.
Complex is comprised of 3 separate structures: the cathedral, the bell tower, and the baptistry. This cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, clad in geometric squares and rectangles of marble in white, green, and pink, is crowned by a magnificent red dome designed by Brunelleschi.
Okay, that's one loop, so I'm going to move this camera so you can see a little bit more of what's happening.
Cosimo the Elder to that of Lorenzo the Magnificent, painters such as Fra Filippo Lippi ate with the family and even had studios in the Medici homes. Cosimo.
All right, so here's a stack, and I'm going to leave this taped down because I don't want to tape it back down, but the stack has holes in each corner as registration, and then there are 3 of these embroidery tacks underneath. Just put one of the stills down, drill the hole, and then these are taped on the back, and there is a space here that would be the 4th hole, but if I were to have the 4th hole, it would cast a shadow from the light direction. So I have these on here. These are actually shot in reverse. I did the first test where it was like sequentially backwards, and it looked not as good. It wasn't as interesting because you could see what was coming next. And so the actual playback is frame 1 goes on top of frame 2, goes on top of frame 3, etc., etc. But in order to shoot it, it's much easier to hold and manipulate the stack if you just, while they're still connected with or on the tacks, take off the top one and then group the rest of them and hold them tight, and you don't have to grab an isolated individual frame. You can just then handle the next one, and without having to separate out anything that you're holding, go that way. And now I'll actually do it in reverse because I need 24 on top, and it's a little bit more awkward of a task, more likely to have mistakes. And the tweezers that I'm using are false eyelash tweezers for people who are going with that, but they're much nicer than other tweezers that I have. They have because it's angled up at this harsh of an angle, there's a lot of contact on for a longer period, where if these were straight or even at like a slighter angle, you wouldn't have quite as much contact between the tips, so you can grab a good amount and have a good hold of it. It's not really an easy way to show I guess I could, if you're looking down here at me in the corner, I can rotate that camera and show the perspective of where the camera is mounted. Let's see. So there's a mount on the wall there, and then there's also a mount for the LED panel light that I usually use for a nice flat overhead, but I need a little bit more of a dynamic look about it for these animations. But there's a cable that runs, well, it's a nylon tube that is for cable management. That's like a braided nylon tube that, or sleeve rather, and it opens and you can just put wires into it and then have them wrap. And then there are points where there are Velcro zip ties. I guess they're not zip ties, but cable management on this mount. It's a little bit awkward of a mount because it goes at an angle, but it's really helpful for anything that I'm doing stop motion on my desk, because it's not directly connected to the desk, where before I had sort of I'll come back in here. Before I had something that sat on my desk and was just sort of an L shape, and if I bumped my desk, it would shift the camera, and putting things on the wall frees up a lot of desk space as well. Just have to use more robust anchors. But yeah. I have one more angle that I want to shoot. Typically what I've been doing is overhead shot. Right now this is a video feed, so it's a little bit more clear than it was before. The video feed has a better frame rate and it gives like a full HD feed. but when I'm doing the individual shots, it's a different aspect ratio, so it crops in a little bit on either side, and then it also just has a worse feed because it's not as necessary when you're shooting stills. But anyway, shoot one more angle. Typically I do straight above, maybe zoomed in, or not zoomed in. This is a macro lens that I've been using. It's pretty inexpensive as far as macro lenses in general are concerned, but it gets pretty sharp. The thing is, it's not automatic and it doesn't have f-stops. It has an aperture, but it doesn't have clicking individual stops and no autofocus, which ultimately for me works fine for this sort of setup. But if you were trying to shoot things quickly, I was looking at reviews and a lot of people were like, it's not good for doing bugs or any sort of living organism, anything that's moving, but it's real good for stop motion. Thank you, Scobot. Oh, and then there's another camera that's pointed down at a cassette player. And this cassette is one where someone's narrating like a travel tape, which is why there's a lot of talk about Florence and visiting stuff, but it's outdated. I think it's from the 80s, which makes sense because it's a book on tape and it's a travel tape, so everything about it is a bit dated.
There is a 7-course tasting menu, which will allow
And
you
so,
to sample
okay, I'm going to switch back to the single image
for less formal dining,
feed,
looking
or
at
the
Otello
still
or
image
the
capture,
13 Gobi.
do one more
Now,
recording
before
loop
the
of
sun
this,
sets,
and then
take a taxi.
it'll be a moment as I import the stills from my camera to my computer and then get an animation. There'll be a little bit of a dead time. I can talk more during that time, but yeah. Might have said embroidery tacks, but these are upholstery tacks. I'll answer your question about the storage in just a moment. All right. So done shooting. I'm going to start the process of importing photos because that takes a minute. And then while they're importing, I will talk about how I've been storing these stills. I don't have crazy number of them, but I have a setup that took a little bit to set up. Can move things a little bit more. I have to take out the feed from my camera for two reasons. One, if I turn on the camera and I have the HDMI cable connected, it won't import the photos for whatever reason. The playback is like a different setting. And then also just physically on the camera, the port for the USB is very close to the HDMI, so I have to just unplug it for that reason because it won't plug in otherwise. Try waves. I'm making a folder for stuff. And then I'll show you my storage setup. Typically what I have is I have file folders and a filing cabinet, and they just go in there. I put the date on them because most of the stuff that I work on is flat. These don't really work well for that because they're smaller and I have dozens of them for every animation, so they get thick and it's awkward in the file folder. There's also no way to quickly look through and see what it is that you're looking at. So I have a different method for that what I thought about were I don't need the scanner. I need devices. Scanner, image capture, and then I actually use the USB port or USB cable that I use for my keyboard. It's right there, so it's easier to connect to my camera. And now it takes a minute to recognize that it's there. So I guess I'll just talk here and then later, or I'll open up Photoshop and I can just draw stuff that way. Close out of this. Oh, yeah. Keyboard's not connected. Just get this one. Make sure that it's popping up here on OBS. Okay. So the stills themselves are made for an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with a 1/4 inch on either side because that's a safety cut area for Cricut. And so I've got the page that's 8.5 by 11 and there's a 1/4 inch border on any side that I have to cut within. And so 8.5 ends up being 8 inches wide and 10.5 inches tall. And the cards, when they're divided up, what I have is one cut this direction and then 3 cuts in this direction, and that's the size of each card that's being, let me check to see if, okay, still not popping up. That ends up being the size, and it's a little bit awkward of a size because 10.5 divided by 4 is whatever it is, but it's larger than a business card and smaller than an index card. It's a weird size. It's 4 by like 2.75 inches, I think. And so I was trying to think of things around that size. So I was looking at stuff like business cards. You can get Rolodexes that are approximately the size of the cards, but most of them are meant to hold about 200 individual sheets at any given time, where I need more than that. So I bought this guy. This guy ended up not using this guy because it very quickly filled up. Let me hold up a card. Let me jump back. I can't see what I'm putting out there. Okay. Here's a card. They're not very large. I don't have a great size comparison, but they're pretty small. It's smaller than a large index card and about the size. It's smaller than a standard index card, which is 3 by 5 or 4 by 6. Little guys. And so I bought this, which is meant for housing index cards that are 3 by 5. But when I stored stuff in there, I could only do it one horizontally or vertically or whatever, and so it ate up space very quickly. And I was trying to think of things that I knew that could this finish? Yeah, okay, I'm going to start importing these files while I'm still talking, which just takes one moment for me to select all these files. I just have to find where today's date that list of files ends. Okay, right here. and start importing those. Okay, I was trying to think of things that are used to store a bunch of stills. I don't need content aware. This is further away from me. Anyway, I looked up card catalogs where libraries have long things that are meant to hold a lot of items. Those, if you search card catalog on any given like purchasing platform, eBay, Amazon, or others, they are pricier for what you're getting. And I wanted something that most of those also are novelty if they're new, or if they're old, it's places where people are not wanting to deal with shipping, and shipping is expensive for something of that size. And I ended up looking, recipe boxes are another thing that fit very well for it. And I searched, if you search index file cabinet or something like that, or index card cabinet, index card filing, there are more options that are cheaper that come out of that are like 4x6 for the scope and scale. And with these cards that I have, you can fit them side by side because they're about 4 inches tall, or they are 4 inches tall, and they're a little under 3 inches wide. So if you go side by side, then that saves space. So what I bought, and I guess I can kind of show it if I pull it out. It says grease on it because it was squeaky when I bought it. This is a metal filing cabinet that, I can't see what all I'm showing on screen if I don't. Metal filing cabinet. This goes into a housing that's like just a square box that you slide stuff in. If you were to go to a school, this is actually where this came from, was a school out in Queens that someone who works at, they were getting rid of it in the building, and people had free reign to like just take what they wanted to. And he was selling it on eBay, and so I went and picked it up. It's 2 of them wide, and it's like about 14 inches deep. And I was trying to search for, I wanted to have little folders that could hold the cards. But most of the folders that I was able to find were either plastic or they were just dividers, single flat cutouts that fit in the scale and size of it. And I ordered some thinking that they were little folders, but they were file dividers. I returned those. But what I have now, and this is done importing, so I can actually switch back to the better camera for this. I'll show you that in just one moment. I can quit out of this. Or I can reclaim my keyboard. I've got so many USB connections to my computer at any given time. I made little folders. I might make something. Right now they're just stored. But I made these little folders. Where am I at? Quit out of this. Let's come back to OBS and turn off Photoshop for a moment. I made little manila folders out of, this is super bright. Let's turn this down a little bit for some better contrast. I cut out little manila folders. I made a template and I cut them out, and I was trying to see if it was like more practical, cheaper, or more efficient to buy material and cut the folders. But I bought like 200 manila folders a while ago, and it's easiest and cheapest to just use, like, cut those in half and use those and cut those out. But it follows a similar template to a larger manila folder where there's a tab here, and then I have a version where the tab is in the middle and a tab on the right. There's score marks that you can fold the file so that it's thicker and supports on the bottom and it doesn't bow out. Yeah, so I had some older manila folders. I even tried to see if I could buy used manila folders, but people don't sell them, and they're so ubiquitous and purchased on large scales that it's much cheaper to buy them new, which is unfortunate for what it is, but I ended up just using the existing folders that I have because it'll be a while before I go through any of them and I can buy new ones. These are wide enough to have the stills side by side. They're held in a contained way. They go into that little file drawer, and that's the solution that I ended up with for storing these. And now I'm going to organize these files a little bit and then see what the animation looks like. 24. See if this is actually 24 if I duplicated. Nope, I got 24. This is 01 dash overhead. And for the sake of you watching, I'm going to go ahead and load these in so you can see what the animation looks like. And I can see too. I like finding pre-existing things that are more or less what I need. Is this? No. Okay. Not date modified. I need overhead. Load these in, and while that's happening, also I was going to say whatever panning that's happening in the animations, it's done in post, because I don't have a great setup for actually like incrementally changing the position of the camera that I have. It works okay, but not great. O2 overhead close. Alright, that finished loading these up. Create frame animation, make frames from layers. Oof, that shifted a decent crop. Alright, let me crop this down. I'm gonna have to realign these. While I was photographing, the camera shifted a little bit, and so I have to take a moment to let's size this down a little bit to be just 2500. Give that a moment, but it'll make this next step faster. I need to align the layers based on content. And then I get to crop them again. So let it resize a little bit, and then come through here, edit, auto align layers, reposition, and that'll be running for a moment. While that's happening, I'm going to organize some more of these stills. It's 24, and this is whatever next one is. 03 top. Looks like it finished. Okay. Now when I go to frame 1, you can see here on the border how much of a gap that is. It would have a jolt, like a jump, when it got back around. Let's straighten this. There's a little bit of distortion on this. I'm just going to crop it into the interior. This will look better once I have the animated GIF playing back in. I'm going to crop it down just a little bit further because there's some stuff coming in from the border. 60. Okay. And for the animated GIFs to help with file size, I make it black and white. And then change the contrast a little bit. Now let's save this out. Modified. I don't want stills. I want a new folder for GIFs, and this is a 1. And now we'll have. No, I'm just going to turn off the camera since it's not being used really. And get this image. Let the frame rate catch up a little bit. And there's the straight overhead, which has the least sense of depth to it, but this feels like robot hands handing something off. There's a sort of feel that I get from it. So it's very similar to the previous one as far as what the motion ends up being like, but it's got a different feel about it. You can see a little bit of the frames disappearing to the back. But this is actually, this is a reverse of how I photographed things. It goes, this music that I made for something or other, but this way the one at the bottom is coming and being put on top, and then over and over and over again, so that it just sort of like gets buried and moves back, but it has an element of surprise as opposed to. I'll reverse these and show you what it looks like backwards. And this is designed fully in Cuddle. The files are. So I'm just going to call this one 01. Reverse, save that out. And then close this. Come to OBS and open up the reverse one, and this one has the frames sort of coming up as opposed to going down, which means that you can see what's coming, and I've found that I prefer the one where it's new and you're seeing the trail behind it as opposed to seeing what's coming next. Just my preference for how it's going. It really depends on the animation, but for this one it's a little bit more complex, so it's not as striking of a contrast. But when I had like some simple actions, it just sort of seemed like 1 then 2 then 3, and you knew what was coming. Not that you can't predict with this linear motion what's going to come next, but you see the echoes of something rather than the prediction of it. Let's load in a different set or a different perspective. I'm going to jump to the top is what I have as the yeah, you have a little bit of that where it's the repeating action. Like if you look at something longer, let's go by name and then do top, because this one has a little bit of an angle to it. While that's loading in, I'm going to try and organize some more of these. A couple of these I did multiple shots for. Yeah, like this one. So I have to figure out where the duplicate is. 03 right. Nope, that's actually 04 right. And then this one also has 25. This is 05 right 2. I'm saying things that don't mean anything to you. Did this finish loading in? This one has that same issue. For whatever reason, it's shifting. This one I don't have as easy of a recourse at this stage. What I'm going to probably end up doing is, you see that little jump? I'll, when I'm not streaming, edit a version of this that is with as a video, so it's progressing as a video file as opposed to individual stills, and it's easier to do like a slight pan that is more subtle than if and less annoying to deal with than if I were to try it in this format. This will still look interesting for this stage of things, but there's some more correction that I need to do. So adjusting the image size. I'm going to rotate this one. Image rotation 9 degrees counterclockwise. And let's make it black and white. Make this a bit darker. And save this out. This one will have a jump when it starts looping, a seam to it, and it's because either the camera moved or over the course of stacking the stills they got a little bit taller or shorter because of how I was handling the stills or something. It's not a perfect system. This is 03 top. But there will be a jump when it comes to this guy. It's got a little kick to it. This looks more, yeah, kind of bug-like. It's a little more spindly. But this one, because it's at an angle, you can really see the frames moving back. If the imperfections were consistent across the entirety of it, then I'd like it more, but because it's just like mechanical failure and it's a seam, it's not as much. If they're like hairs or like bends in the paper, I'm more okay with it, but because it's something that is entirely my fault and unintentional and not part of the process in my own way, I'm going to try and fix it in post. But that's more annoying to do for something where it's progressively changing in Photoshop than it is to do it in a video editing program. So I'll eventually come back to that. And let's doubled up on this. Oh, these have numbers in them. This makes it much easier to know which one's a duplicate. I think it's around like 12 or something. I'm previewing something outside of what you can see on your own thing. I was able to do it with the previous animation, the first one. Wait, is this 18 twice? Okay, that's my duplicate. Now it's 24. Yeah, okay. Rename. Oh, don't want to compress. I want to rename. 4 right dash. Okay. If there's a background, then I can align the images based on content or whatever, but I can't do that when the stills are changing constantly, where everything is new every single frame. So there is an easy way to realign things in Photoshop to make it so the pan doesn't happen, but I need something like these images where you can see something that's constant, but when I'm photographing a new still every time and the information is drastically changing from one photo to the next, if the entire frame is filled with the animation still, then it doesn't work to do the like auto aligning layers because it doesn't have constant information or really overlapping animation. It's a new still, but it's further behind, so it's not a constant. Okay, let's see if this one has that same issue. I might have just been doing it the whole time. This one looks like it's pretty good. These are decent sized photographs, and so I can crop it and still have something that's about 4K. Like this, let's see where 4K ends up. 21609. About here, about this. It's not exact, but this is about 4K. But I'll crop it down a little further. Let's pull this out a little further as well. Make it a little taller. I just want it to be all contained within the border of the still. But it means that allows me to pan and zoom digitally, where if I'm doing video recording or the small little stills, you can't see what I'm talking about because there's too much covered. This is still like above and beyond 1920 by 1080. This is almost 4K. Here, I'll show you. I'll get real close in on it. You can really see the paper texture. But for the purpose that I have of saving out as an animated GIF, gotta make it a lot smaller. Black and white. Curves. Pull this a little bit darker. Pull this lighter. And save it out. not all of these perspectives have the still numbers in them. 4 right, 1. And so when I'm trying to figure out which ones I have duplicates of, it's much easier for one like this, because I can just see what number is repeated, which is not the case for all of the perspectives. Let's get show you the one that I just saved out. Live design. Oop, that's not what I wanted. Browse. Live designs. Modified. Trail waves. And this one you get a real sense of it moving backwards. There's a little bit of a jump, but it's not pronounced, and I think that's just the paper being further off the surface. You get a nice sort of cascading of the light, and you get a sense of the sort of a staircase of paper along these edges when it comes down. I like that. I'm going to let that play for a second while I figure out. Yeah, I enjoy a lot of the process, and sometimes I dislike some element. And then I like it later. Okay, here's a duplicate. Is this? That's 24. Cool. Rename. This is 5 right. 2. Rename those files. I renamed all of them. Cool. And how many is this? 24. Cool. New folder is going to be 06 left. And I'm just going to load these in and animate that out. And then I'll use the other stuff for other things. Because I don't think the second right perspective is that different from the first one. You can see these loading in. So this animation that is currently playing is from when I'm looking at the animation from the right side, angled over, so you see more of the shadows. And this next one is taken from the left, but from above looking down, so the shadows are cast from a different perspective. Let's see if there's any drift here. Nope, looks pretty good. All right. I don't know the frame rate on. And I'm going to crop it this way. I'm also going to turn off this light. I don't need this for any reason. Give it a minute here. The width is the shorter side. And make this black and white. Bring the darker bit down. Bring the light up here a little bit and save this one out. And then I'll come back over here, turn off Photoshop, and show you what I just did, and then show them all together, the ones that I saved out. This one really has a sense of like handing something off. So this one is overhead, this bottom right one. This one is from the top perspective. This one on the bottom left is from the right side, and this one is from the left. While I still got stuff out. Alright, how's this? Yeah, you can see them all and compare them more directly. There's a little bit of a jump on this guy, but not too much. This guy, meaning this one. Okay. Spiel time. If you want to buy stuff from me, you can go to my web store, traceloops.com/store. If you want to purchase something and have it shipped outside of the U.S., you can email me, traceloops@traceloops.com. You can also email me with comments, concerns, questions, curiosities, commissions, etc., etc. Again, that is traceloops@traceloops.com. If you want to watch this stream or other streams in full, you can go to the live section of my YouTube channel, youtube.com/traceloops. And there's a bunch of recordings there if you want to see the photography for these guys. Not so much of the process of cutting it out, because these take a while to cut out, even with the machine. If you want to follow me on other platforms, you can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Tumblr, Spotify, all of those places. I'm Traceloops, TRACELOOPS. If you want to support me on Patreon, you can do so by going to patreon.com/traceloops, where you'll find high-resolution versions of artwork that I create during streams. You'll also find a selection of tutorials, and then at higher tiers, new songs from me weekdays, and at the highest tier, you get a monthly postcard from me with original artwork on the front, little message on the back, and a discount to that aforementioned web store. That's it for today. Tomorrow I will not be streaming because I have a follow-up dental appointment. Nothing should come about it, but it's just I gotta follow up because make sure everything's doing good. Which it has been. This is like the fourth follow-up. It's root canal retreatment. I had a root canal done, and then the cap wasn't on super tight, and so stuff got underneath it, so they had to redo it. And then when they redid it, they left like a little bit of cotton in there, and so I had it retreated a second time, which is annoying. It's frustrating, but it's been good since. But yeah. So it won't be streaming tomorrow. Thursday, it's possibly streaming or not. I don't know. But what was I gonna say? I forget who is talking at any given time, but you can find the songs, most of them on streaming. What I have playing in the background, it's full tapes, and the ones that are on streaming after a certain point, I switched to editing them down to 30 minutes out of like 90 minutes per tape. And so it's a mixed bag for what's on stream and what's available for streaming on music platforms. But most of what I play is available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, YouTube. There's a bunch of places. Anyway, thanks for watching. No stream tomorrow. Tentative stream Thursday. And Friday I should stream, but there's also a chance not. I've been a little less consistent because I've had a little bit more happening in different ways, work-wise and other. Not anything of any like concern or something. Just stop streaming for a couple days here and there. Yep. Okay. Have a good rest of your day, and possibly back Thursday, and possibly not. Not 100% sure. I have a call that is at like 1:30 that might run long, but have a good day. I'm gonna head on out. Adios.